Hello, Levi.
What's up?
All right, let's get started.
Yep. Basically, this is about the video that you made not too long ago, where you responded to a mutual of mine, Retro Waves, where you stated that um, you don't believe in a socialist economy because you think the best way to protect the minority is to limit the power of the majority,
Hmm.
and you think that I think there might have been like a sort of disconnect between like what leftists mean when they say America is racist and versus what you said in the video and what you may have meant in the video, basically.
Sure. Yeah, that's the
And
that's the premise of the left I took. I don't necessarily believe that America is a racist society, but there are many arguments to that. Many arguments to limit the power of the majority, and I was using leftist rhetoric itself to ask a rhetorical question. So is that your only objection?
that you said, is that my only objection?
Yeah, are you defending like socialism, democracy in general, or is that
It's not even just necessarily like socialism necessarily, because like me for instance, I'm not necessarily like, I know the basic principle of socialism. I don't know if I am necessarily educated enough on like every economic system necessarily to go ahead and like cast my ballot into like every single one to like any particular one, anyone in particular. Like I'm not
Mhm.
100% sold on capitalism, not 100% sold on socialism. Like I think honestly we should take the best from all of those systems and see if there's a way in which we could create like something a bit new for society that we could
Yeah,
hopefully move forward to benefit everyone. That is my idea. But
sure.
my thing is that like when we say that America is racist, it's not necessarily like, it's not so much individual people that are racist, if that makes any sense, but
Hmm.
it's rather like
Institutions,
institutions and things that are set up
sure,
that are that contribute to racism and that in a way allow people to be racist, basically is what
sure,
is meant when a leftist says that America is a racist country.
sure.
It's not
So,
necessarily like, oh, white people as a majority are racist. I
sure.
mean, we just saw like
Wait.
we just saw one of the biggest social justice movements, one of, if not the biggest social justice movement, civil rights movement in history over this past summer with the Black Lives Matter movement. And there were record turnouts of people of all different shapes, sizes, ethnicities, colors, what have
Sure.
you. So
So
that when
okay.
we say
So
that it's like,
so two
say one more
questions
time.
from that. So you're saying currently there are institutional policies that are racist, and second question, if like then if that's the case, who puts these people and institutions into power, if other than the majority?
Okay, so the thing is that my argument is that it's not necessarily, well, it, how do I say this? It goes down like it goes so deep. That's how ingrained this is in America. Is that it's like, first off, I think it starts on like the educational level. I think a large part of this is the fact that people are just not educated on certain issue on enough issues, or on certain issues. They're just not educated enough.
Right.
So like I get this all the time whenever I talk about racism, and that is like, oh, you spew hate and you don't actually know what you're talking about, even though I have many there's so much data out there that backs up what I and many other leftists have been saying about racism and about America being an institutionally racist country. And a large part of that has to do with like people rejecting things such as critical race theory being taught in schools because they think
Right.
it has to do with racism, and because
So let's say
not that it has to do with racism,
that
but
premise, if
it's
you take that
teaching.
premise, let's say you're correct in that critical race theory is correct and so forth. But you just what you did is just argue against democracy. You are saying that people are too ignorant to change the system. So you made an argument against
Well,
democracy.
it's not that I'm not saying that people are necessarily like they're too ignorant. Well, yeah, they're too ignorant right now. They're too uneducated right now
Okay,
to change,
right.
to really bring about any
Then
sort
why
of
should we give them more
change.
power? Why should we increase the power of the majority when they're ignorant?
Well, because see, what happens is what I think what happens is that when another thing is that the reason why a lot of the people that are in office right now, because there've been like multiple studies that have shown that like if the electoral college and if things like the electoral
That's just
college
the
and
president. Everybody else is
What do you say?
not just the president. Even then, if you we only have two
Right,
instances
right.
where
Not just
they
the
lost the
president.
majority vote and still got elected. But other than that, pretty much everybody, even senators now, are directly elected by the
Well,
people. You're arguing that
hold on.
we have systemic racism there, which you haven't given an example of, but you're saying that is the issue. But I'm asking if it is the majority who has the power, who elects these people, puts this institution into place. And
But
on one
the
hand,
thing
you're
is,
saying majority or the people are too ignorant. On the other hand, you seem to the video you made, you were defending when I was attacking the majority rule. So which
well,
position is
no,
it?
no, the thing is that like the people that are being elected into office are being elected actually by a more minority group because of things such as the electoral college
That's just
and
one office.
systems
The
within our
electoral
government.
college is just one office. And even then, Biden and everybody, uh, we had Bush once and then Trump in 2016, where they didn't win the majority of the vote, but every other president had won the majority. And every office, congressman, senator, are all
Right.
win or majority elected.
But like the thing is, we need to continue to educate people
Like, what
and
is it?
get them.
But
What do you
let's say,
say?
okay, let's take the position, educate people. What is the incentive for people to get educated?
You said what is the incentive for people to get
Uh-huh.
educated?
The time cost and it takes to educate yourself on these kind of issues. What is the why would anybody bother? Because end of the day, you only
Why
have
would
one
anybody bother?
vote. No, no,
About
think.
because you would want to you would want to be educated to bring about a better world around to
Sure,
bring about a better to bring make the world better for people for yourself and other people around you.
sure, you're right.
That's why you
But
would
that's
want to be.
exactly why if I'm that kind of person, let's say I'm very generous, very altruistic kind of person. But then what I would do with my time is that I would go down to my soup kitchen, volunteer, something like that, instead of waiting 4 years to have one vote. The incentives are not there. I only have one vote out of 100 million plus, and I cannot make a change through education myself. So, as a whole, we have a incentives for population to be educated, but on the individual level, we don't have the incentive. And you yourself were saying that people are ignorant. So your own premise
Well,
refuse theory of democracy.
wait, so you say so you're saying so wait, go ahead and say what you're saying one more time. Say what you're saying. I don't know if I'm necessarily if it's not
Sure.
clicking up here if I'm not understanding.
As a whole, like since we have democracy, it makes sense as a whole for our country to be educated, right? But when we actually go down
Yes,
to the
yes.
individual level, for me, for example, let's say I'm altruistic. If I want to help people, I should spend my time not like reading stuff on racism, all that, because end of the day, I know I only have one vote, and I can use it every 6 years or 4 years, whatever it may be.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But like there
I cannot
there
affect the outcome individually. But if let's say if I spend the exact amount of time going out to the soup kitchen, helping people, whatever I may want to do, as an altruistic person, I can see directly that I can help people better through doing those things than if I only have one vote, which doesn't affect the outcome. So you
I
have,
mean,
and
yeah,
this is well studied. This is called public choice theory. Um, Brian Kaplan phrased this as the irrationality of rationalism, or the rationality of political ignorance. For individually, every person's level, it makes more sense for us to do things, for not to spend time. The amount of time it takes. Like I can use you as an example. It might be embarrassing for you if I ask you like questions. You haven't spent that time, I'm sure, because it makes sense. It doesn't make sense uh, on for every individual level to spend that kind of time. I do it because I find it interesting. But if I
well, I
was
mean,
concerned, if I was Mother Teresa, for example, I would go help people. I'm not gonna say like just reading books and articles and stuff, and knowing that logically I only have one vote, I cannot change the outcome.
so you're right. So your thing is people should instead of just saying things and waiting around to go vote, they should just go and do things to help their community, right?
No, the position I would take is we need to reduce the power of the majority, so then you don't get rent seeking. Rent seeking is corporate crony capitalism, where since people are too ignorant, like I'll give you statistics, for example, 70% of people can't even name their senators and congressmen, like not even name them. Forget about things like more in depth. They cannot even name them. So what do you end up getting is that you have all these lobbyists and people. who seek power, who look to affect the congressmen and politicians because they can directly benefit. But only counter we would actually have is people who are educated to elect these people out of office, but that doesn't happen. 95% keep getting reelected. So that's why we have a
Right.
system.
Because there, like I said, there's institutions in place that allow them to keep getting
Institutions
reelected,
elected by the
such as
people. People can make the
such
change.
as
Majority can change the entire institution, everything. Supermajority can even amend the constitution. There is nothing limiting the power of the people.
you say that last part one more time.
There is nothing stop limiting the power of the people. People can, if people want, let's say Bernie Sanders, they want to elect a bunch of 535 Bernie Sanders and AOCs. Nothing is stopping them from electing him. And but the reality is, 95% get reelected because 70% cannot even name their senators and congressmen.
Well, so your idea is that like people are not. Are you saying like people are not like exposed enough to like the things
People
that
are
are
people don't choose to spend that kind of time because the cost, when you look at a cost benefit incentive analysis, the
right?
amount of
And that's
time it
why I
takes.
said like it starts kind of like at an educational level where we have to tell people and instill within them the yeah it does like you have to tell people
It's
you
not
have to
education
inform
though.
them people have informed to make decisions about to make the right decisions or decisions that they feel are right for them, such as not only just like going out and like helping people, but also like you know taking the time to research and learn and actually
Sure.
study up on the
Okay, let's
candidate that
let's
they're
take you
voting
for
for.
example. Can you tell me, like, for example, last five laws Congress has passed without googling it?
Last five laws that Congress has passed without
Mhm.
Googling it. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not off the top of my head. No.
sure. But think about the theory of democracy. You're supposed to know exactly what laws they're passing. Even before they pass it, you're supposed to call your congressman. You're supposed to have done a cost benefit analysis, uh, like rational, objectively, and see what good it does, what bad it does. Then call every citizen is supposed to call their congressman and tell them. But here you're advocating for democracy, but you can't even name the laws that they have
Well,
passed,
I'm not necessarily like
right?
I'm not
Because you
necessarily
could.
advocate. Well, what you
Because you
say?
have shit to do.
Say it one more time.
You have shit to do. It's an incentive time problem.
Right.
Uh
Right.
huh.
But like at the same time, like we should like what I'm saying is that we should be like I do not know these things off the top of my head right now,
Right.
no. But like at the
Theory
same
of
time I do
democracy
know
dictates that you do. You're supposed to know every vote your congressman is taking. You're supposed to know at the national level, at the state level, at the city level, and you're supposed to have an objective analysis of these laws. And so next time when he runs for election, you can primary him or vote him out of office. But how many
like
people do you
I
think
do
know
know
that?
that how many say that you said how many
Do
people
you
do I
think
think know.
actually do this? No, almost nobody would actually do this.
I mean, I think a lot of times it comes down to like people too many people get focused on the um the presidential election and like whether or not they like the candidate that they're voting for instead of like the laws and stuff that person or like
Right.
we only know what that person
Exactly.
says that they're going to do. Like, I don't like how Biden right now basically lied to us and said that he was gonna forgive student loan debt, but then turned around and didn't forgive student loan debt. I don't like how Biden just recently bombed Syria, but yet we have people over here who are like starving, who don't have health care, who dying because of global pandemic, whatever. And yeah, he's done an okay job handling like the the pandemic and the virus, ensuring that everybody gets like vaccinated and everything. But like, I mean, at the same time, I'm not 100% on board with like everything Biden has been doing and everything that Biden has been like passing necessarily.
Right.
I'm
So
not. I'm not.
yeah. So people don't. What people do is take shortcuts that kind of either based on irrational points of view. For example, maybe they don't like. Maybe people didn't like Obama's race. That's why they voted against him, or maybe they voted for him because of race.
Right.
Right.
But like,
So this is what the point I'm making. So when it comes to democracy, the what we have is not a rational system of people objectively analyzing things and voting for and against.
right. And
Hmm.
again, I think a lot of that stems from the base level of just education in general, whether or not people are whether or not
What would
people
you
are
do
taught.
education wise? Like what
What do you
education would
say?
you change? What education would you change? We see that the IQs have gone up while political knowledge has gone down.
You said we see that IQs have gone up, but
IQs have
political.
gone up,
Well,
but
yeah,
political
because
knowledge is
your IQ is just your ability to learn and like retain information.
right.
But like the thing about our current educational system is that it's all based off of regurgitation. It's not based off of actually learning and like maintaining and absorbing what you've learned in school. It's just about whether or not you can regurgitate, you can cram and regurgitate information to study for a test. Meanwhile, you don't know. Can you actually say that the information that you just regurgitated back to your teacher is something that you actually understand, actually know? Like
Sure.
I think we need to revamp the way that we teach people nowadays. Teach people to not necessarily cram and regurgitate, but rather to understand what they're actually learning. Because I think when you actually understand something, you'll retain it. And I also think we need to teach people how to better analyze, better research, and do better research and analyze data and what have you. That's nothing that I think people should that I think we
Eli,
should be teaching people.
nobody is stopping anybody, or the education system is not at fault for the fact that 70% cannot even name their congressmen and senators. That is an incentive problem. It's not an education problem or anything else. It's simply an incentive problem. You can Google it and look up who your senators and congressmen are, but people don't bother because the incentives are not there.
So we need to teach again. We need to like teach people that they can. A lot of people don't know that they can look that up. Did you know that the majority of America like reads at a seventh grade level? They
Uh-huh.
can't even like look up. They can't even if they were to even
Well,
look up this stuff, they wouldn't even be able to comprehend what they're looking up.
well, I'll
Even if
thank
they
you
were
for
to even
slam
if they were to.
dunking on the thank you for slam dunking on public school system, but that is still not the issue. People can like people should
But
know.
I think it is. I think exposure and education eliminate things such as biases um eliminate things such as biases and bigotry when you actually have people
Sure,
that are
but that's
exposed and
only
educated.
two aspects of it. Even if we assume everybody's rational and objectively analyzes policies and candidates, you still have the problem that I'm just describing. That you don't have the incentives are not there. End of the day, you know that you have one vote. You cannot change the outcome. Why
So
would you
I think a
bother
large part of
spending? It takes the time. There are not enough hours in the day for you to be educated on every level. Like I said,
right.
like I asked you the question, the laws Congress were passing. You don't know. Most people wouldn't know. I don't know either, by the way. I'm not like picking on you or anything. But because the time, you don't have enough hours in the day for us to work 8 hours or whatever and have families and girlfriends and so forth.
Right.
And then go and, research exactly what Congress is doing. Congress, state, your city, so the incentives are completely screwed up. What we need to do, actually, I'll tell you the actual position. What we need to do is then reduce the power of government. What we have, you get two things out of it. For one, it's like, so if we have like a lower level of democracy, we vote. Say if you want to go to war, that's a democratic decision. You can have direct democracy for that. We say so that'd be something like that happens not that often, so people can have actually
I
take
mean,
the time to
we go to wars right now, regardless. Even though we have a
exactly
democratic society, we go to wars regardless of whether or not the people want.
because of
Excuse me, to go to
people.
war.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because
So instead of Congress deciding when we go to war, we can have a direct democracy deciding when we go to war. That'd be like, but all the other, if you remove most of the other powers that Congress has, what we get is that you get a better system of democracy and you get lot less lobbying because uh, lobbying is one result of political ignorance. Is because they know that they can lobby and get benefits. Well,
so
I'll give you one example, like
right.
concrete example for this. There's something called sugar subsidies, and there are tariffs in place that prevent us from importing sugar. This has existed since FDR's New Deal era, so it's bipartisan. What that happens is the sugar lobby benefits around 5 billion a year from this. They lobby politicians so it never gets repealed. On the other hand, each person individually only it costs like $15 a year, right? So now you have a disconnect of interests or incentives. You have for me and for every individual, it doesn't cost us anything. Pretty much it costs us nothing. So we're not gonna bother our congressman or senators, say calling them every day, repeal these things. These are bad for us. On the other hand, the lobbying groups they make $5 billion. So they have every interest to spend all their money lobbying politicians. So politicians in return, what do they do? Because people who elect them don't care, but on the other hand, people who are lobbying them, they can benefit from them. So we have sugar subsidies and tariffs and quotas that has existed for over 70 years.
So you think that so you think I'm trying to fully like understand based off
I know
of
it's a
like,
lot of information, and then I can refer you to the subject matter. It's called public choice theory. It's a lot to read.
okay, so you think that the majority should have less power and that would bring about a better world. That's what you
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. Yep.
And you think it's because the majority are too ignorant to actually make the
No.
good decisions that can bring about a better
Yeah.
world. Is that what
Right. No, no. It's not. It's not ignorance in general. It's ignorance in the arena of democratic decision making. So
so
you could be a scientist
should
or
we
whatever. You're very knowledgeable, but in case of politics, you're ignorant because it doesn't benefit
well,
you in any way to
politics
spend that time.
I mean never mind. Anyways. Um so you think that I'm just trying to fully to make sure that we get on like the same track here. So because of the fact that so do you not think that we should educate people on political things?
Education is a personal choice, in my opinion. If you want to get educated, you cannot force people to get educated, of course.
Right,
So
you can't force them to get educated,
you
but
have to
I
want to get educated. I mean, we can provide a K-12 education, but beyond that, you
technically
and
you force people to get educated because if people don't send their kids to school or provide some evidence of schooling of some sort, then parents get like thrown in jail or what have you. But
right.
like, I mean, like, shouldn't we in that case revamp the public education system, or at least revamp what kids are learning, what kids and teens are learning in the public education system, and teach them things that are actually teach them things that would actually help them within the real world instead of finding the areas of squares and Pythagorean theorems,
Well,
etc.
on a practical level, your knowledge of mathematics and science is more helpful than your knowledge of how government works. So that's another.
Why, if the whole thing is that if the whole thing the whole point of if the whole thing about you wanting to limit the power of the majority is because majority doesn't know things about politics, then why I'm
Majority
confused
doesn't
because the
know.
thing is politics is a way in which laws are created that govern our lives today. So shouldn't we want to educate people on how those systems of government, how these laws, and how everything flows
Right,
together? Because
but
it's something we're gonna have to. Because then I shouldn't go out into the real world and not know how to really defend and not really know how to fend for myself, or survive and exist in the real world, much less um, know how politics and government works. And then I don't know who I'm voting for when I go in the voting booth, and I don't know anything about this because I was never exposed to it. My thing is that like a lot of people are never really exposed to these kinds of things and know even that there are that they can vote out the mayor or um the governor or whatever. They don't know when these elections are, and I think a large part of that is because of the fact that the like I said, institutions that are in place that don't want people to really focus on these kinds of things, and what they really want them to focus on is things like the presidential election, etc. If that makes any sense. Like you know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Like
but
people are not
there are two problems with that. One is that well, I went to high school here in Texas. I took government one and two. So they do teach you all of those things. Now, like you, even at the city level, they tell you what's going on. Second is you still haven't addressed the incentive. You can educate people in K-12 all you want. That doesn't change the fact, when they're old enough to vote,
so
they still have to
if your thing
research
is
the
that
issues and so forth. You're trying to frame it as an education issue, but I'm telling you that it's an incentive problem.
um do we so you think that people just don't that the majority of people nowadays like lack the are just too lazy to try to like
Too lazy.
educate themselves on these matters and take the incentive well not take the but take the initiative to educate themselves on these matters? Is that
Because
what
they
you're
cannot
saying?
Right, because it's not laziness. It's actually logical because you have one vote. You know like anything a person can figure out that you cannot change the outcome. So then what you get is a messed up system which has incentives are backwards. Since when we give, even though as a nation we should be informed, what we get at the individual level is people who can, again, 70% cannot even name their congressmen and senators. Can you name your congressmen and senators?
Um, congressmen and senators within Ohio. I know that in Ohio we have Steve Shabbat. I know that he was one of the ones that we were trying to, or at least I was trying to vote against and vote out. Um, and I believe we have Ohio has two, don't we? We have two in
We have,
Ohio.
yes, you
I
have
know
two
New York.
senators.
New
You
York
have
has
two senators
two.
and one congressperson.
One congressperson. Okay. I don't remember whether or not Steve Shabbat is a
Right. So that
congressperson or
so that's what I'm
I don't
talking
remember
about.
that off the top of my head, but like I
What
could
do you
easily
do?
find that.
You
I
can
could
find
easily
out.
find that on
Right. You can find out, but
very.
I'm saying then what do you end up doing? As I'm going to assume here, what do you do is when you go to vote,
Well,
what do
I
you?
would research. Like when I went out, like when I voted in my city this past year, like my fiance and I sat down and we actually researched like each candidate and for like each position, each category and what have you. And then we decided based off of like what our wishes are and who we are as people, who we wanted to vote for, and we cast our vote that way. We went ahead and did we took the initiative and we did the research um to cast our to determine where we would like to place our vote.
Right. So let's say you're the exception. You actually objectively analyze everything, all the candidates. You spend all that time. But do you think that's how other people decided in your election?
No, I don't think that's how other people did. No, but at the same time,
Right.
like again, a lot of people like you have a lot of people who just think, oh, I'm gonna vote Republican straight down the ballot every year because that's what
That's
Dad
that,
told
that,
me.
that's
That's what Mom told me.
exactly that's the
Yeah, there's
information
people
shortcut.
who say that one time.
That's the information shortcut. So you're talking about Biden, for example. There you have people vote either Republican or Democrat without actually doing the.
Right.
Uh-huh.
There are many people out there on both Republican who are both Republicans and Democrats
Exactly.
that
Even though
that
democracy dictates that we make rational, objective decisions instead of taking the shortcuts based on like a team sport, just voting Democrat or Republican.
right,
So
but at the same time, like I said, like I think a large part of it is just that like regardless of whether or not you want to bring up incentive, again, like I think this comes down to I think personally that it comes down to like an educational issue and explaining to people like what different policies are, the views. Like I was explaining somewhat the views and goals of like the Democratic Party and what have you, and the Republican Party and what have you when I was in high school. But I think it largely comes down to like getting people to understand these things. Like well, yeah, getting people really to like understand these things and process and comprehend them.
it's a no. There's no education you can do that
Well,
incentivizes.
let's see how you
Like
do it.
nothing is
Like how
stopping
do you
people from looking up. Like nothing is stopping people from looking up who their congressmen and senators are. And beyond that, we see this across. It's not just the United States. We see political ignorance of this type across the world. Europe, Australia, New Zealand, all we see this. This is throughout because exactly because it's not because of education. It's because the incentives are not there. So the solution is you reduce the power of government and you have a
well,
you reduce the amount
maybe
of
we can make it
information
to where
people
there is
need.
an incentive.
Hmm?
Maybe we can make it to where there is an incentive among people
Like
to
what would that be? At the
to
individual level, what would you do?
well, I mean, let me ask you this: why do you think there's not really the incentive? Why do you think the incentive is not there? Let
Right,
me ask you
because
that.
I've been said a few times that you only have one vote every 4 years or 6 years or whatever. You know you cannot change the outcome. You're 1 out of 100. You're a better chance of winning the lottery. Your vote cannot, as a matter of statistical fact,
But why?
change the outcome
But why? Why is it that your vote cannot change the outcome?
because it's statistics. You're 1 out of 100, 100 million.
Right, but like if again, if everyone knew. if everyone
Everybody news.
if
That's
everyone
what I
had
said.
the incentive, then they would be educated, and if they
Hmm.
were educated, they would know where they would like to cast their vote.
All right.
So like
That's what I
we
said.
should boost
And
the incentive of people by educating them on these issues so that when they know more, regardless of whether or not whether or not it's just one vote every 4 years, or however how long of what's what I'm looking for, or however much time spread out, or whatever you want to call it. Like I think that if because like I said, there's elections with in between um, the presidential elections. Like I think we should still educate people for those kinds of things too. And the thing is, like, I can say that I'm not educated on those elections, and I need to research more and do more research on like when those elections take place, um, where I can go to vote. Do I make maybe what kind of registration might need to be done? Get other people around me, raise awareness for this kind of stuff. Get other people around me registered for these kind of events as well, and just because like I think once you invest in the community, you can then invest within you can then invest within the incentive potentially and drive up the incentive to get people to go out
how do
and
you drive up the incentive
uh,
at an individual level?
by raising and spreading awareness within your community.
No, but that doesn't change the
Like for
incentive.
instance,
As an individual level, I can take a look at, okay, these are the, if I'm to be objective, I have to spend maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 100 hours researching all the candidates at every level. Why would that incentivize me? I can look at the amount of effort, amount of cost that's personally on me in terms of time, and then I can look
well,
at what I can do. Hmm?
because that's the only way in which that's the only option that we have available to us to try to change
No,
the outcomes of our lives, really,
no,
in terms of laws that are
no.
written and things that might get
No,
better.
I'll give you a complete opposite example. For example, uh, how we act in the market. For example, let's say you're going to buy a TV or a car, whatever what you may have you. Now the incentives are completely in line because you yourself pay the price and you're paying the direct price of whatever you're buying. So let's say you don't do your research, you go buy a shitty TV, shitty car, then you yourself end up paying the cost. In democracy, what happens is, let's say you just go vote for whoever, and then, but if that's a good vote, let's say accidentally you made the right choice, you pick the candidate that's objectively better, then the whole country benefits. You benefit and the whole country benefit, but the benefit is spread out, right? It's 300 million people, you get one part out of 300 million. On the other hand, let's say you made the wrong choice. Now, the cost is also spread out. You don't pay the cost. In a market, you pay directly the cost of being wrong. In a democracy, you don't pay that cost or get the benefit. It's spread
Well, I
out.
would argue that you do pay the cost of being wrong by via
Yeah,
the
the country.
fruits that the
Right, that's
share
what I'm
that you
saying.
basically
Country
cut
as a whole,
over the.
the country as a whole either benefits or is worse off. But but that's spread out is the point. So
So that's
on an individual
I don't
level,
think.
now you have a now you can do whether do you want to spend all this amount of hours, whatever however many hours there might be in doing this research when the cost is spread out and your vote cannot make much of a difference. It's
So
statistically
you're saying
irrelevant.
that because of the fact that people are basically selfish because it doesn't directly benefit them right then and there, they're going to
Mhm.
be less likely to go out and go out and try to make the change or make the
People don't do it for
do the
selfish
research.
reasons. What they do, they don't do it for selfish reasons. What they do is, like I said, information shortcuts. So even though they don't
Right. So
actually,
people should be educated and they should be informed on issues and topics.
what are you talking about? You can inform yourself on any topic you like. There's nothing stopping you. We have the internet.
So,
Every
but you just
entire knowledge of humankind is at our fingertips. There's nothing stopping you from educating yourself. It's not a question of
and
education. It's a question of incentives. Like what can't you look up right now?
there was like
You
a
don't have to
knowledge
go.
or information. Isn't that what you just said that?
Say again.
You just say that there's a shortage on like information and
No, the
like
information is out there. The information is out there. Nobody just like who your senator and congressman are. Just nobody bothers to look it up. just like that. All information is out there. Internet, everything is out there. But it's not a question of education. Nobody is bothering to educate yourself. It's easier to be opinionated than be educated.
Right, it is easy to be opinionated, but again, I think a large part, and this might be just something that we just agree to disagree on. I
Oh,
think
no,
that
no, it's
again, people are not exposed. I think people are just not exposed enough to are not exposed enough to know how, like, to value the importance of looking up senators and people and senators, congressmen, etc., and casting a logical vote for those people. But anyways, um, so when in your video you stated that if we wanted to give power to the majority in America, but by leftist rhetoric, America is a racist country. But why we want to give power to that racist to the supposedly racist right, or to the supposedly racist white majority, right?
hmm
That's what you said in your video.
Yes.
My thing is that like that's not what is meant when we talk about like socialism and what have you. And yeah, that's not what is meant. What is meant, not socialism. That's not what is meant when we say racism or that America is racist. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the debate,
hmm
we believe that
That
people are racist because
uh,
of because of the systemic institutions that are put in place
right.
that
Yeah.
basically allow racism.
Right. So let me,
And that
yeah, we addressed this in the beginning. So I asked you, what can you point to any actual specific laws or policies that are systemically racist? And
it's not even necessarily.
second was then again, if you have systemic institutions and politicians in place, then the fault is still on the majority, the democracy that is electing these people and putting them into power. So you have a contradiction
Well,
of both ways.
when you have a system that makes it to where it's not just one person, one vote, that also can discourage people from potentially going out
You
and
don't have
voting.
one
Which is
person,
like
one
what I
vote.
said about gerrymandering and the electoral college. Is that, like, for instance, like we've seen it in history where presidents did not get the popular vote but won the election simply because of a rigged election system. That plays a part within systemic racism, and um, yeah, that plays a part within systemic racism.
Right. That is plus like you have like two presidents or three or four maybe that actually lost the majority vote and got elected. So majority of politicians are directly elected. So that's a moot point. And you said gerrymandering. Sure, that happens on both sides. That are uh, Republican and Democrats. They all do it, but that doesn't stop people from voting however they want to.
Right, but
If
again, like,
supposedly
in a way, we need to make it to where people's vote, like you said, people don't think their vote matters, right? So shouldn't we make it to
oh,
where
that's a
people's
statistical
votes
fact. It doesn't
matter,
matter.
right?
It's not a
What do you
matter of
say?
thinking. It's statistically a fact that your vote is
So
insignificant.
shouldn't we eliminate things such as voter suppression laws, like the ones that took place, like the ones that were, like, for instance, you wanted me to bring up laws that are systemically racist or what have you, right? Like the voter suppression laws that were just recently passed in Georgia because Georgia flipped blue because of the fact that there was an individual who went out and made sure that black people were registered to vote, made sure they were informed on the issue, and as a result, make sure they were informed on the issues, and as a result, Georgia was able to be flipped blue. Now, because of
What
that, Republicans took that personally and decided to pass voter um, voter suppression laws
what is a
in
what
Georgia.
what specifically in that law was voter suppression?
Okay, so there were things such as you can no longer hand out bottled water to people who are in line. There are certain IDs that, yeah, because see, the thing is that, like, if it's gonna be hot outside and I'm gonna be standing outside in
No, no, no.
line
Wait, no, no.
and I
Hang
have to
on.
vote.
First, let's address first. Well, let's address one. You cannot hand out things that are run by campaigns. And you cannot hand out things that affect people. That's been a long time. But at the same time, it doesn't say you cannot hand out things to black people, does it? So why would that be suppression?
Well, but the thing is that, like, like a voter, that's still a voter suppression law though,
How is that voter
because
suppression?
because people are going to be less likely to want to go out and vote if they run the
If
risk of getting like heat stroke or whatever
what?
because they're standing out in line for so long.
Well, one of first off, they can bring water themselves if they're afraid of having.
But like my like, what if
Nobody.
my water like I'm gonna need somebody to bring me a water bottle. But that's only one of the things that I mean. You laugh, but like
Hang on. Let me respond. Let me respond. You think you actually think people actually go out don't vote just because there might not be somebody to hand them water?
well, not just that, but it's like that
Okay,
could
that's
be
what
a
you
thing that
said.
discourages people from voting because it's like I mean I don't want to pass out in line from a potential heat stroke. It's not only that, but like they limit the certain they limit like certain IDs that are required.
Okay.
They limit like to like IDs or like certain IDs that are required. And for minorities, a lot of these can be harder to get. And
Like,
is there really a
why is it hard
coincidence
to
that
get?
because they're not like educated on ways in which they can get them, and
So
there's
you
many
think
other factors such as
black
whether or
people aren't
not
educated?
they. I mean, statistically speaking, there are well, it's not necessarily statistically speaking, because technically the ones with the most degrees in America are black women, but it's not just black people. There's many people of color that may not be able to get access to these forms of identification that may be accepted at polling locations.
Like you can get one. You can get it takes like you can renew it every 7 years. You cannot get one ID in 7 years.
Give me one second. So it's not even just.
Are you
Hold
looking
on.
up that law?
Hold on. I did videos on this like a while ago. Um,
So we're so we're. I mean, you're defending democracy. You're supposed to be pretty educated on these things.
well, I'm not even. Well, yeah, defending democracy, but like there, it's not even just like the whole like water ball thing and what have you, but like when you tell people that like are only certain IDs are accepted, and then like such as reduce like when you say that certain IDs are only certain IDs are accepted, but then like for instance like driver's licenses and what have you, not every black person has a driver's license, and not
Sure.
every black person has the ability to necessarily get a driver's license.
What is stopping a black person from getting an ID? Actually, by the way, let me just if you're indigent, for example, you can get a free ID in Georgia.
What do you say?
What? Uh, first off, if you're indigent, you can get a free ID in Georgia to vote.
Indigenous? Did you say? Are you saying indigenous?
Indigent means if you're poor.
If you're poor?
Yeah, indigent.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't
Right.
understand what you
Yeah,
were.
and then second is what's stopping? Why is only minorities? What's stopping a minority from getting an ID?
Knowing like how the know how to like get said ID and what have you.
Why
Like,
is that? Why is that only affect minorities?
well, it's because minorities are typically undereducated
So,
or criminally undereducated
by what? Public school
in these
system?
types and with these things.
Yeah, public school system under educates them.
Yeah, public school system undereducates them because it lacks the funding and the proper curriculum to educate these people.
So that means they weren't going to vote anyways then.
No, they would still vote because they at least know that it is A, their constitutional right, and B, that it's something that they're voting for things that affect them.
Which is it? Which is it? Are they uneducated or they know enough to actually go vote?
I mean, everybody knows that you can go vote at least,
Right.
but like
Everybody knows you
again,
can go get an ID.
what do you say?
Everybody knows you can go get an ID. And like I said, if you're claiming that somebody's educated enough to go vote, one hand you're claiming they're uneducated, undereducated. Second hand you're saying, well, they don't know enough to know that they have to or they can go get ID. These are two contradictory positions, which is
It's like you shouldn't really need an ID to go vote though. Is the thing.
well that now
Like,
just
why would you need?
completely no. You have just completely
Why
shifted
would you?
you have completely shifted the goalposts. First you were saying this is voter suppression. Now you're
Yeah.
saying we shouldn't have an ID. But that is
Well, I
that
mean, it is. I haven't shifted the goalposts. It's what it is. It's voter suppression.
no no
Like
no.
you
You
should.
still
You still
haven't
should.
No,
What do you
no.
say?
You could argue you shouldn't need an ID, but that's completely different than claiming this voter suppression that affects the minorities. This
Because
targeted
somebody
against
did,
minorities.
because a lot of minorities that like a lot of minorities just can't get certain like
Why?
maybe might not have things such as like their birth certificate or social security card on hand because of
Why does that affect
whatever.
white people?
What do you say?
Why doesn't that affect white people?
I mean, it might affect white people, but again, it's
So it's
typically
not voter
going to
suppression.
this is typically going to affect the it's going to disproportionately affect the disenfranchised.
So it's not voter suppression. It affects everybody. Everybody has to follow the law.
But it's still going to be, but it's still voter suppression that is going to hit minorities harder than it is going to necessarily hit white people. Because again, like
Right?
you have to think about it this way. Also, like for instance, they shrunk the time for like early voting. So and
No,
they shrunk the time for like early voting.
no. Georgia
They shrunk the
Georgia expanded early voting. They actually expanded the number of days.
did they really?
Yep.
Because I see something that says that
No.
that they actually shrunk the window for early voting. They added additional photo ID requirements, allowing state officials to circumvent the work of
Let
community
me give you.
election officials. Don't like the outcomes they're seeing, um, and it goes as far as to make it illegal to give groups standing outside um, food or water while they're stuck in long lines.
Right. None of those. What they did was they reduced the hours on weekends, for example. But they also
The
expanded the
hour,
number for early voting. They reduced on the weekends. They reduced the hours like till
yeah,
5 p.m.
but
or something
see, the
like
thing
that.
is,
But at the same
the
time,
reason
hang on. But at
reason why I don't
the,
think voter suppression is because the majority of the bulk of our working class is people of color.
it's
A
working class
and
then.
B, those
It's not actually minorities.
it actually is the bulk of the
No.
working class
Okay, hang on.
in the
Well, hang
United.
on. Well, what I was saying was they reduced on weekends hours, but they expanded the number of days. So it's they actually didn't reduce as a net. They did not reduce the number of hours. But
They did not reduce the number of hours.
no.
Let me check that.
I'll give you another example. This comparison was made since Biden was claiming this was Jim Crow. They compared this to Biden's Delaware, and Georgia actually has more days and hours available of early voting than Delaware. Yep. Yeah. One true quick. Yeah. 17 days exactly. So they have 17 days of early voting. So how
But
is
when
that?
you take
That's not. Is that not enough time?
what'd you say?
17 days is not enough time.
But I mean, it's one thing if you extend the number of days in which you have to like go vote, but if I'm not able to go vote on those days or during the time in which it is allowed, then it's
I
pointless
mean, what
because
do you
again,
want? What do you
like
want? Like 6 months?
do you not see how limiting it on weekends that's kind of bad because like I said, a lot of people who are of the working class, that would be one of the only times in which they would be able to go vote is to work is on the weekends.
Working class usually don't even have weekends. They usually work through the weekends. Blue collar work, like white collar
I
workers
mean,
like
some
me.
people.
Yeah, but so your argument isn't so. But at the same time, 17 days is plenty of time if you're informed and you want to go vote. That's plenty of time. How is it then enough time? What do you want? Like 6 months?
Well, not 6 months, just time for when people can actually go. Like I said, it doesn't matter the amount of days if the people A cannot get there or B just cannot actually
But you can,
go vote.
but
Now,
but you
limiting
can
the
make that
days
argument.
doesn't matter. Expanding the days doesn't matter if the hours during those days are not available or accessible hours for people because they're either A at work or they have other responsibilities that they have to attend to.
But you can say that. You can say it could be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. You could always make that argument. Well, maybe there's somebody out there who just cannot get to it in
Okay,
that time. You
let me
can
put it
always.
this way. Voting, if I work Monday through Friday and voting is and you took voting from being on the weekend. This is hypothetically speaking. You took voting from being a Friday evening until like 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. thing and Saturday from 9 to 9 or whatever, 9 to 5 or whatever, and then you moved it to, you said, okay, well, it's only going to be like maybe um, a few hours on Monday, but I work on Monday and I can't really get time off, then I can't go vote basically because the only time in which you moved when I'd be able to actually go and cast my vote.
What that doesn't apply to any. So you could have people working night shift. Maybe it's the opposite. When you they
Okay, but
actually want.
not everybody works the night
That's what
shift.
I'm saying. So it's
Some people.
everybody. That's why you have 17 days. Yeah, you can always come up with any situation that, like, like I said, you could be 6 months and you could still be like, oh, there's this one guy, he works outside and offshore or something. Then he needs 6 months and maybe he needs a year. You cannot always come up with these examples, but like fundamentally, you're claiming it's voter suppression. And I give an example. Do you think Delaware is doing voter suppression?
What is what is I mean, I think honestly, everywhere in the United States there is voter suppression going on. I think the fact that we don't have, I think the
Like
fact that
what?
we don't have election day, that we don't have a set day where everybody has the day off to go vote. I think that's voter suppression in and of itself. I know that to somebody like you and to maybe some of your followers, that might be seen as like a very radical thing. But like, I think that there should be that voting day, that election or voting day should be like should be a national holiday where
So you're
everybody
saying
is
the
able
entire
to.
country is voter suppression? Well, at least that's a so entire country is voter suppression.
I think that there is voter suppression all over, not just Georgia. I was just giving an example with Georgia, but there's
Right.
voter suppression all over the country when you think about it.
No.
I
Yeah, I've
think the
thought about
fact
it. No, it's not voter suppression.
that there is a rich minority that can go vote, basically, that can basically find the time to go vote, but there is not, um, but sorry, but there is a majority of working class people who can't necessarily find the time to actually go and vote. I think that I mean, because of things such as work, having a job that doesn't let you get off, which I mean, you could say that
I
doesn't really
mean,
have anything to do with it.
I
But
mean,
the fact that like voting is not really a thing where it's like, okay, the government is allowing or like making time where it's like, okay, this is where everybody can go vote. We're gonna make voting like the day to where everybody goes and votes, election day, a national like holiday, so that everybody has so that everybody for sure has accessibility to voting. I think that's voter suppression.
no, that's not by any definition voter suppression. But on top of it, it's
I
not
mean,
just one day. Yeah.
like I said, I think it's voter suppression. You may disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think that in a way is a form of voter suppression. I think that voting is because of the fact that it's like literally us deciding who's going to write the laws that are going to govern us. We need to have the ability to like it should just be a holiday
No, no,
for everybody to go vote.
no, no. Just as I understand the English
Think about it.
language.
Capitalism, because think about how all the capitalists would be like, oh, the day after election day sale where everything is 50% off.
No,
Like
no,
it would be a great thing for capitalists.
Eli, this is just it's not even semantic. It's just straightforward English. Suppression is trying to keep somebody from. This is not the definition of voter suppression.
Right.
It
There,
doesn't apply.
and things people will be discouraged from voting if there's so many hoops that they have to jump through just to go cast their
But
vote, and
okay,
they're
but
already told by
now
so many people it doesn't matter.
now this argument is extremely ironic because the number of hoops you have to jump through, we already talked about the information, the amount of information you have to analyze and rationally and logically make a decision. So that's the biggest hoop we are talking about. So you're now arguing against yourself. So
So
if
you
you
say
can't even
so
bother, so if
so
you
you
can't
think that
even
people should
bother
be
finding
educated.
few hours, if you can't even bother finding few hours to go vote, how are you gonna spend hundreds of hours researching?
There are so many people who simply cannot. It's not even necessarily that they can't find. Actually, yeah, they not being able. Hold on. Can't find the hours. Some people can't get the transportation to get there. Like, and then let's say I can't get the transportation. I can't even really get the transportation. Transportation. Blah. Can't really get the transportation to get there. It's like, what's the point? If I'm gonna be waiting in a long line. There's a chance I might like pass out from heat stroke. They might not accept my ID. Um, they might not accept my ID. I might not get there in time.
Which ID
Like
won't they accept?
Let me see. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Sure. So it's pretty simple solution. Just get the ID that you need and bring a bottle of water. That's if that's voter suppression, I don't know what to tell you.
But the thing is, what's the need for it though? Like, what's the reason? Why would we need any of
To,
that? Why
it,
would we need
well,
something like an
once you
ID
agree it's not
to
voter
go
suppression, we can go into a different subject.
outline in the Constitution when it's outlined in
No,
the
no, let's
Constitution?
sure. Hang on. Let's do one at a time. We can once you agree that it's not voter suppression, we can go to the subject. I can tell you why it is necessary.
Oh, hold on. Let's see. I mean, you can go ahead and shoot whenever you want to.
Sure. So I guess voter suppression issues settled. Just bring a bottle of water and get an ID, which is if you're too poor, Georgia will pay for it. It's not that hard. You can renew 7 years, valid for 7 years.
Why would we need it though?
Right.
There's
That's
no
what I'm
point
saying.
in having these laws.
That's what I'm going to ensure voter
Oh, sorry.
integrity. Yeah, to ensure voter integrity. You need an ID to do pretty much everything. Buy a gun, get on a plane, whatever. Buying a gun is constitutional right. Yet we have background checks and other things. So why, in the least, we should have ID for voting.
But why though?
But even by
So
to
you're
ensure election integrity, we don't want.
we should have IDs for we should require IDs for voting because we require IDs for everything else.
No,
That's your logic, right?
right, to ensure election integrity.
But why?
Why ensure election integrity?
Like why? Hold on, not that. My thing is, I don't think that there should be. I don't really think that there should be an ID required for um for like wielding a gun. Even I mean, it's outlined in the Constitution that it's your constitutional right.
Right.
Now, I do believe in like permits and what have you, and yeah, to go get like
You cannot you
like
cannot
a
get a permit without an ID. You cannot get a
right. And
permit
I'm
without
saying
an
like
ID.
permit, yeah, go ahead. But like to buy a gun though, I don't think so.
So
I think anything.
wait, what? So permit.
I don't. I don't.
So you can buy a gun without a permit, but you need a permit anyways.
A carry permit. Like you can have a gun within your home,
Hmm.
but like you don't necessarily need a permit to but you need a permit to carry that gun outside of your home. Unless I
But
have my
then,
gun laws
but
wrong, and you even need a
isn't that
what you
suppression
say?
then? Sounds like suppression. Minorities can figure out how to get an ID and then get a permit.
Wait, say that more time.
So isn't that suppression? Minorities cannot figure out how to get an ID and get a gun permit. So you're suppressing their right to defend themselves, according to your logic so far.
Well, no, what I said was that like I could understand why they need it for like getting a permit to carry outside. Like you need identification to identify like who's getting
Yeah.
who's getting this firearm,
Right.
and who's going to be the one
Of
carrying
course.
the firearm outside. But
It's
just to get one, but just to get a gun itself, like you can get. If I'm correct, I mean, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong. But if I'm correct, don't you like you don't necessarily have to have a permit to own a gun.
no. Owning is now if you can only keep it at your house, then that's half useful. But for you to be completely useful, for you to have the right to defend yourself, you have to carry it with you when you go outside. And you're saying you require a permit for that, right?
Yeah, a permit to have to carry, but
Right.
that permit is not preventing me from owning a gun. Is the thing. That's what I'm
But
saying.
okay,
Unless
but that's like having a Ferrari that you don't drive. If your gun is just sitting at home, you're outside. How are you going to defend
well, I
yourself?
mean, because if someone is breaking into my house, someone is
Right.
being
That's why I said
looking.
half. It's half useful. That's why I said half useful. When you can defend your house, but you're not always at your house. So why do you need a permit when you go outside? And why is that not suppression of minority if you're requiring permit, which
I mean,
requires ID?
I mean, I guess it kind of is suppression of minorities.
So you're in favor of suppressing minority.
No, I'm not necessarily in favor of it.
So you're coming out against gun permits.
No, I mean, okay, I get what you said there. Yeah, you're technically right in that case. Like, I'll admit, you're technically right in that case.
Right. So
Um,
that's what I'm saying. And I'm not again. I think you should have like you should display your competency and get a permit. I break with libertarians on that. But at the same time, it's the same. Uh, it's, it's the same logic. You have to ensure election integrity. You have to ensure that people who are voting are who they are. It's pretty straightforward. Why should you not show an ID to make sure you're the same person that you're saying you are?
because like, what does it matter in terms of voting?
Election integrity.
How though?
What do you mean? I can go vote 100 times then.
I mean, not necessarily. Not if I like,
I can. What do you mean?
write my
I
name
can look
down.
up. I can get a. I can do it.
There's other systems that you can make to where like there's other systems that you could probably do to make it to where like what if I just show like a social security number instead? Like I just provide my social security number instead,
Right. I can.
and
I
like how
can.
many times I so my social security number. See, with a social security number, that's something that everybody can like. That's something basically everybody like has to have access to as a social security number.
Right. But I can. I can dig up a social security number of dead people and just go vote.
But it's a dead person. It's no longer
Exactly.
active if
How
it's
would
like
they know?
if it's
How would they know? I am not showing an ID.
but if they like
Anyways, I got to run, Eli. It was nice talking to you. Maybe we can do it another time.
I mean, I guess.
All right. Hey, thank you all for joining and take care, Eli.
Yeah, thanks for joining.